we have a guest. It's Thursday, and sexy producer Michelle does such a great job of finding some interesting, fun people to kind of come and kind of tell us about maybe some business that they've started or some interesting story or history. And I feel like in a lot of ways, a lot of the guests that we've had have been inspiring in their own way, in their own kind of corner of the world, and their unique view on things or a unique talent that they have. And today's guest is much the same. Before I tell you here's what we're going to do. So our guest is an impressionist. He's an actor. He's on an amazing series that I just started watching. I'm so glad I found because it's so funny. And it stars, besides him, Chris O'Dowd, who is the guy that was in Bridesmaids as the love interest. He's adorable. And Jim, our guest, plays his dad. But he has an amazing talent for impressions. We're going to learn more about that, how he got started, who his famous mom is. There's a lot of stories to tell. Before we get to it, I want to introduce him via the video, right, Shell? So this is an older video of some of the impressions, and then we're going to talk about what he's doing now. Take it away, Michelle. Here we go.
Well, our current president, Donald Trump, has a voice that we're perhaps a little too familiar with. But I was wondering, how many presidential voices can we remember?
For example, there's Barack Obama, who always starts off his sentences very slowly and then wraps them up quickly at the end.
Quite the opposite from George W. Bush. Comes out of the gate real strong and then slowly applies the brakes for emphasis. For that, there's Bill Clinton, who I still think he sounds like he inhaled.
And for that was George Bush Sr., future groper. And before him was Ronald Reagan, who would probably tell Trump today that, well, a gentle voice can tear down a wall.
And speaking of a gentle voice, before President Reagan, there was Jimmy Carter.
Before him was Gerald R. Ford, who pardoned Nixon.
You haven't forgotten my voice, have you? I tape recorded it enough.
Prior to President Nixon, there was Lyndon B. Johnson.
And before him was a man simply known as JFK. Which begs the question, which came first, the man or the airport?
Before him was Eisenhower, the president that most resembles Admiral Akbar from Star Wars.
And before him was Harry Truman, and if you don't recognize this voice, maybe you'll recognize me from the front of the dime.
And FDR, whose voice lives in the memory of the people who incessantly watch the History Channel. And by the way, I'm the one who's on the dime, not Harry.
And then before that, there's, there's Herbert Hoover. What does he sound like? Oh, yeah.
So listen, he is the son of American TV mom Marion Ross from Happy Days. Somebody said I already told you guys, so the game would have been dumb anyway. But he also has played Senator Edward Gurney opposite Julia Roberts and Sean Penn in Gaslit. He also has portrayed Phil Donahue in Welcome to Chippendales, Colonel Sanders in KFC commercials, George Washington in Geico commercials. He's currently starring in the Big Door Prize, which is on Apple TV. And he's also been seen in Hunters, starring Al Pacino, Carol Kane. The list goes on and on. Whose line is it anyway? Impress me. All of the fun stuff. Please help me welcome very early in the morning his time. So appreciated. Please welcome to the show, Jim Meskimen. Hey, Jim.
Oh, hey there. Hi, Dena.
Hey,
I'm just searching around my booth for any metal. Something here. I was listening to what you were saying. You know, there's a very funny British series called The Detectorists.
Huh.
It only lasted a couple seasons, I think. But the tall, skinny guy from the original Office, the British Office, Mackenzie Crook, he wrote and created the series, and Toby Jones is in it, and it's very dry. It's the driest of British humor, but it's about guys that go out there in the English countryside and search around with their little metal detectors. And
I bet it's hilarious.
Real treasure. I mean, like hundreds of years old treasure.
It's so funny. It's so funny talking to you after watching that video. I'm not sure who I'm going to be talking to when you start talking, because you are a master of just change. Like, how long did it take you to shoot all of that in a row and remember the order and like your fate? Like, it's incredible.
Thanks. I wish I remembered, but yeah, it took a while. I was preparing something. I think I was going on The View, and they wanted me to prepare something, and that was what I came up with. So, and then I think we wound up doing something else. But it was I do a lot of social media stuff. I put a lot of stuff on YouTube every day, and Instagram and TikTok, and it's fun, and it's inexpensive as an activity, and it's a way for me to have fun and to meet a lot of
That's
people.
great. Well, it's funny. When I mentioned you and your video was playing in the comments, everybody's saying, yeah, I know Jim. I follow Jim. So where can people find you first so that they can follow you on Insta or Facebook or the TikTok? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm on all those things. Generally at Jimpressions.
Okay.
Jimpressions is kind of my overall brand title. So on Instagram, I'm at Jimpressions. I may be I think TikTok is at Jim Meskimen. Meskimen, as you can see, it's spelled just like that.
Yeah, I love it. So and you say actor and impressionist and son of Mrs. C. So tell me, what was it like? I mean, it sounds like you've kind of grown up in this industry. What was that like as a kid?
I did grow up in this industry. I was not a child actor, but I did observe my mother, her career rising from being a working actress. She did prior to Happy Days, she did all the shows of the 60s and 70s as a guest star. She was, in Westerns, all the many, many Westerns of the 60s. And she was in Mannix and the Brady Bunch and, guest shots. Now, she was a single mom, raising 2 kids, my sister and I. So she really struggled and hustled, I would say. Rather than struggled, I would say she hustled. She was a hard worker and grew up, raised in the Depression, a Minnesota girl from just out there in the wilderness, the Midwestern wilderness, with a real strong intention to make it, to be a star, to see her name in lights, and in a way that I think was very honorable. It took me a while to figure out why it was honorable, but she desperately wanted to get out of that little town and become a person that mattered. And that's what she did.
I mean, she was iconic as Mrs. C. I mean, I remember growing up and watching it and just thinking, gosh, that house, that family just was so wholesome. And you're like, she's just so beautiful. And, it was around the time where all of those TV moms were just dressed so beautifully and their houses are so beautiful. I mean, it's just such a lovely, great time.
It was all propaganda.
Oh,
but beautiful propaganda. We all enjoy very much.
What do you think your mom would say? I mean, like, considering coming from a time where, like, at that time, in order to make it, like, somebody had to find you, somebody to put, time behind you and support you from a network side, where now what you do, what I do is, put your little phone on and stream from your house, and you can have a career and blow up just by nature of people watching you on social media. Like, I wonder, how differently people back then would look at these people now, or becoming famous in their living rooms. It's got to be so different.
Yeah, she really doesn't grasp it particularly. It's so different from the traditions that she grew up with, and she really liked acting. She really liked, being in plays, and even in the off seasons when she wasn't doing Happy Days, if they weren't playing softball, which they did a lot, they would tour around and play softball.
Really?
Oh yeah, they had a very active league, Ron, because all the young men, they love to play softball and baseball and do sports. And Gary Marshall was quite shrewd and loving in that he was the guy that created the show, right? Gary Marshall.
Yeah.
I say shrewd and loving because he had this ulterior motive. He wanted to keep these young men alive and not see them dusted by fame, completely destroyed. So he organized this tour that would promote the show. It would allow these guys to meet their fans and allow the fans to meet them. And it would keep them busy in a very healthy way.
Yeah.
Because they were all like a version of the Beatles. They were somewhere on the Beatles scale.
Yeah.
And they were, had way too much money and attention. And it could have been it could have been kind of grim, but he kept them very busy. So my mother also toured with them, and Tom Bosley and all the whole cast did.
Amazing.
And there she is there in later years with me.
Mm-hmm.
But when she wasn't doing that, she was doing plays. So she loves to do the activities of acting and being in front of an audience. And I saw her in innumerable plays, and she was just wonderful always.
Yeah. And so when did you kind of know that you had the bug and that you wanted to do this?
Yeah, I sort of tentatively was attracted to the whole thing. And I did like to perform, but I was kind of shy. And I didn't really make a full commitment to it, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, until quite late, until I was in my early 20s. And then I moved to New York City and got started there in improv. And that helped me to loosen up a lot and to realize that, I have something to offer.
And how did you get kind of moved towards impressions? So I am a comic by trade. I have 3 kids. 2 of my kids are doing stand-up now.
Oh my.
And it's so interesting. My daughter is doing stand-up, but she's also doing improv. And she's like, I feel like I have to pick one. I'm like, if you can do both, keep doing both. They're just completely different muscles. Comedy is comedy, and improv is, I find it so difficult. I'm like, if you can do both, it's such a great thing because they're such different muscles.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jerry Seinfeld did a lot of improv in a group that I was in New York City. He was there before I was, but he got a lot out of that experience. Improv is a different way of creating humor or theater. So yeah, but you're right. Totally related. I forgot the question, to be honest.
So I was saying, so you're in improv. When did you figure out that you were good at impressions like that?
Oh yes, the impressions.
How did that come about?
Well, it's something that I've always played with. But I didn't have any big designs on making a career out of it because, I don't know, it didn't occur to me. It was just fun to do.
Yeah.
If I was together with friends, I would eventually start doing voices of the shows that we watched or the movies that we enjoyed or the teachers we had. People in our lives or personalities. So I had a facility. I guess it was just a little bit better than other kids. Part of that, I guess, is just God-given. Part of it is that I was sort of tickled and interested by it.
Yeah.
So when I arrived in New York trying to look for, I knew I could be a voice actor. I knew I could get a career as a voice actor. I just had that understanding. And I discovered pretty early on in my auditioning that, I had a little bit of a leg up. I had just a tiny advantage over the rest of all the fine actors that were in New York City at that time. So I got a lot of voiceover work right away. It wasn't always impressions. It was being expressive vocally being able to do different emotions vocally. But I could also do Gregory Peck, and Burgess Meredith back then in the 80s was a very, very sought-after narrator. So I could knock off his voice for a cheap industrial and make a buck.
And it said you can do Christopher Walken. I have a whole list.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Dena, we're talking here. And the thing about Christopher Walken is that a lot of people exaggerate it to a degree that's sort of embarrassing. His own voice has enough sensitivity and cadence to it. I don't think you need to go overboard. Just say what you got to say.
How about Sir Patrick Stewart, who's so...
How about Sir Patrick Stewart? Good old Sir Pat. How about him? I mean, he's one of my favorite ones to do lately because he's got such a charming attitude about things and a twinkle in his eye. And really, you have to change the whole way you're sitting and the way your vocabulary to do Patrick Stewart. It's a lot of fun.
Now, I'm going to be honest. So I recently divorced Jim and back on the dating scene. And if I met a fella who I could just be like, call up an accent. Women love accents. I'd be like, Jim, do that. You're Irish tonight. I would be changing your accent every single night. Does your significant other was like, listen, maybe you could be a little English tonight? Like, it's amazing.
Well, I'm happy to say I've been married for 36 years to my beautiful Tamara, and we met in high school, actually doing plays. So she's been well aware of all my peculiarities, and I think of all the people in the world that appreciate what I do, she's far down the list, but she's still on the list. So
that's good. That's fair. Now, somebody asked me, can you do any female impressions? Is that something you do?
Well, I used to do Ariana Huffington, but the problem with doing a female voice, if you're a man, is that you always sound like you're making fun of the woman. It's difficult to do. So because you're in falsetto, which is not, I suppose, the most respectable way for a man to talk.
I love it.
She's not the only one I do.
I suppose I could do Julia Child, though, but Julia Child had a very masculine voice, didn't she?
Mm-hmm.
And she sounds a little bit like Dame Edna, doesn't she? All you have to do is put a little small Melbourne accent on Julia Child, dear, don't you, Possums? To do the great Dame Edna.
I love it. So tell me, so you are now currently starring on the Big Door Prize.
Big Door Prize. You mentioned Chris O'Dowd. I play his father, and he's a charming fellow and a marvelous, marvelous comedic actor and lovely guy. Father of two, and very silly. I like him a lot.
He's effortless when you watch him. Even from the first time that I saw him in Bridesmaids, I feel like that was the first time I saw. But so is this your first series? So a lot of the things that we had talked about were like movies or bigger productions. This is your first series, or have you done that before, like voiceover wise?
Well, no, I've done lots of TV series. This is the first. Oh no, it's not the first one I've been a recurring character on. I actually had my own series for a while, which I sort of don't discuss very much because you can't find it anywhere. But it was a wonderful show called Impress Me, about Impressionists. But it was a story. It was about how people like me lead their lives and the kind of work and the kind of adventures they get into. And it was a very charming series. And it starred also Ross Marquand, who you may know from The Walking Dead, and he's gone on to do many, many great things, and is a wonderful, wonderful impression.
Play on The Walking Dead.
He played a character called Aaron. I had like a false arm by the end of it. He had a sort of a funny arm that was. I didn't watch the show, to be honest. I like Ross a lot, but it's not enough to watch The Walking Dead, I'm afraid.
I'll have to look him up. So speaking of the Big Door Prize, it was actually the first time that I heard about the show. Like, I loved finding little gems of shows, and I hadn't heard about this show before, and I just watched a few episodes. It's a great show. I love when they will take an episode and kind of dedicate it to a person, and you're kind of seeing it from their point of view and their perspective. I feel like you kind of fall in love with a cast a little bit more when you get to kind of see their point of view. So it's a great show. It's on Apple TV. It said did you just finish your second season or just got approved for a second season?
We finished before the WGA strike, which began a month ago. We finished season 2 in Atlanta. Yeah. So I don't know when that'll roll out, but right now, season 1, all 10 episodes are streamable on Apple TV Plus, like you mentioned.
And it's so great. Your character, the scene of you and your wife telling him at dinner what you've decided to do with your marriage is hilarious and just so charming. And then your scene with Chris after that, taking your shirt off. It just, all of it. It's just so lovable. You do such a great job with it. I'm so happy for you to be in this cast and to, do you feel like it sounds like, based on what you've said, that the impressions have really helped kind of break you into a couple different things. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. Impressions, when you're an actor, right, and trying to like I am, I'm not trying to get a room in Vegas where I can do an hour and twice a day. I'm an actor. I'm like my mom. I like that life. I like dipping into a production and playing a part and creating a character. And impressions is just a tool, particularly when you're portraying people that have existed. Like when I played Phil Donahue, I went online. I looked at him. I tried to figure out what does the guy sound like? What's this attitude he has?
Yeah.
And even playing Senator Gurney, who was less a lot less visible than Phil Donahue was. He was a real person that existed. And so an actor can go and study somebody famous or infamous and capture some bit. If they are an impressionist, they can just hone it a little bit closer and make it a little more satisfying for people who care.
And have you met people that you've impersonated, and have they like given you feedback on on how they thought you did? Has that ever happened?
It doesn't really happen very often, but I mean, obviously I know Ron Howard from the Happy Days years, and I've been in several Ron Howard films, and he's aware that I do a Ron Howard impression, you know.
Yeah.
Now at this hour of the morning, it's a little difficult to do, but yeah. So he's aware that I do that, and he's, you know, he's commented on it. He's very gracious about it. So
yeah.
But I try not to do an impression for the person that if in case I happen to meet them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't exactly. Hey, Robert De Niro, how are you? Hey, listen, hey Robert, this is not for nothing. I do this. I do your voice for things like, you know, like you do your voice, but you know, obviously you get paid.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. Where are you going? Where are you going?
I know, it's funny. I saw your Merv Griffin, and it's so funny because I feel like if you get that hair right, he just had that piece of hair that just kind of
Phil Donahue.
Phil Donahue, yeah, but with just that hair, the way he would.
Yeah, you get it.
That thing.
Fling it out of his face. Yeah. They put a very dense hair piece on me for that thing.
Yeah, his hair was everything for sure. All right, so what is next for you? Any new projects coming up? Where can we find you? All of the fun things.
Well, you know, we're on strike right now, pretty much. So I'm not actively doing too much, but I'm preparing a one-man show that I've done over the years, and which has always, you know, sort of shuffled the deck for me. And so if any of your viewers are in Los Angeles, in probably in August, I'll be launching that. But if you keep in touch with me at Jimpressions on social media, and on YouTube, I have my own YouTube channel where I put stuff up every day.
Awesome.
Then I'll let you guys know when that Jimpressions show is going to launch. And then I don't know. I just had a video game for all your video game players out there. Star Trek Resurgence. I play Captain Solano, who's he looks kind of like me if my nose was longer and I had a nice mustache. And he's a guy who had a starship and it didn't do too well. They had to get exploded, and now he's back on the bridge of another starship. And how's that going to go?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you have your hand in so many fun things, and I'm so glad you could join us. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure meeting you. And
be talking to you.
Be sure to follow Jim. You can follow him on Instagram at Jimpressions, on Twitter at Jim Ross Meskimen, and on Facebook at Jim Meskimen. So thank you so much, Jim. It was such a pleasure meeting you. We'll be following you and keeping up to date on everything.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.